You're a fine art artist, and welcome to my studio. We are on week 4 of painting some beautiful sheep in a beautiful landscape scene. So every week I come to you live here on YouTube, not Facebook. Whoops, told you it's live. So I'm coming to you live here on YouTube. So go ahead and click the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing next time. And if you're even really wanting something a little bit more, go into the comments area, the description down below. There's a link and you can subscribe to my newsletter where I will send you updates on what's coming up and what's going live and all that good stuff. So, welcome. We are, like I said, on week 4, and before we get into our painting, I'm going to cue the intro. While the intro is going, go ahead and share this video out to the world so other people can see what you are about to do. Thanks, guys. See you in a minute. All right, welcome back. So we've got my sheep up here, and what I'm going to do is a little bit different than what I've done in the past. And you know, where I left you guys off last week is I had you working on the 2 sheep on the right? I'd walked you through how to paint the first 3 sheeps, what colors to use, and so on. So I'm going to actually show you sped up the painting of the other couple sheep, and just kind of some other touches of what I've done and kind of talk through that as we go along. So stay over in the left hand. I'm going to show you that. And then I also want you guys to pop in any questions into the chat area and I will real time address those. If you're catching the replay of this after, you know, like 12 o'clock, 12:30, go ahead and leave comments or questions below as well and I will answer those. All right, so here we go. All right, so what I've got here is, you know, I'm starting to work on the 2 sheep on the right. You can see my little paintbrush is starting to go. And what I'm doing is I'm adding on some highlights onto the rump of it, right? So click play. So you can see I'm starting to add in some more colors. And these are still the same color palette that we used last week. All right, there's my reference image. That's helpful. So I can kind of see how dark it's getting over in there. And you'll notice that my painting is not as dark as a reference photo. That's one of the things I really enjoy about painting, is that I kind of get to play with everything. I want to pause for a second. All right about, okay. So if you noticed a few seconds ago, what I did was I'm painting on his rump, right? And then I go over to the sheep on the left and I added a couple little dark spots in him. What's happening there in my mind is I'm looking over at the values, and the values are like how dark things are in comparison to something else. So what I was noticing is like I was getting really dark over on the rump and I liked how dark it was. Maybe I need to get a little bit darker over on this sheep, and I'll actually apply that logic all throughout those sheep and keep going. You know, add a little dark here, it now needs it over here, type of thing. So you'll see me kind of do that dance quite a bit. But all right, so let's keep going. Again, post any questions if you have some. Okay, starting to move on to the other sheep, and I'm adding some midtones there. Notice I'm still going back to that other one. I'm kind of moving back and forth. You'll end up doing the same thing, and just not at fast speed like this, but this, just so you guys know, the 6 minutes of, you know, fast speed, it's sped up, I think 6,000%. So I actually took probably an hour and a half doing this. Okay, so it's not a fast process. It's not meant to be. Oil painting is supposed to be relaxing. So relax into it. Don't feel like you're getting pressured. Even during this video, if you feel like you need a minute, pause it, okay? That's what I'm a firm believer in and tout on my paintonthepalette.com is learn, paint, repeat. So I want you to learn something, go and apply it, and then repeat it. Learn, paint, repeat all the time. Okay, let's keep going. Remember to breathe. Okay. Yep, going back in there and adding a little bit more depth to that other sheep. Adding some highlights around the rump. Start to really give them shape. Okay, yeah, I do use my fingers every now and then. So a little caveat to that, just kind of good studio health habits. Don't eat while you paint, because like you just told me, just stick my finger in, stick my finger in the paint. So your paints, they do have like cadmium, titanium, zinc, cobalt, manganese, all these types of things. You don't want to ingest those things. So start with a good studio habit of not eating while you paint. Also, I firmly recommend, like, if you have a beverage, make sure it has a lid, because I can't tell you how many times I have dipped my paintbrush in, like, a glass of wine, a hot chocolate, or tea, and you can't drink it after it does that, okay? So, just saying. Closed containers, very, very handy. All right, so yes, you can use your fingers. Just make sure you're clean about it. Wash your hands off afterwards. Don't put them on your face. That's one of the reasons I wear hats, because I don't like getting paint on my face. I feel like I just don't like doing it. So, all right, here we go. Starting to modify that little one that's kind of in shadow a little bit more, darkening up around the areas. And I keep doing the dance with the darks all over my sheep. Okay, getting into some details there. So you'll notice how close up I am choked up on that brush. Oftentimes you'll see me way back on my brush. So like, here's my brush, it's pretty long. So I will often be back on it like this, but there are times when you get into those details, it is totally okay to get up there and really get in control of it. And that's what I'm doing here with the sheep and their little ears. Okay. Now when I added those highlights around their ears, one of the things that I did, is I just lightly touched a few little areas of it. I didn't make a whole line. I just touched a couple little areas of it, because not the entire ear is not going to show like a bright white line, right? There's going to be a couple areas that are going to sparkle. So just like what I did with the darks, I'm going back where I see the values about the same for the lights. So I was just touching up a highlight there around the sheep's ear, and then I went over to the other sheep's, top of his head. And his rump. All right, so I brought our ruler. So like I was talking about a little bit ago with the paintbrush, sometimes when the canvas is completely wet, I will bring out my handy dandy ruler and use it as a maul stick to steady my hand, so I can really kind of get up there into the details without worrying about getting my paint on my hand. So once it gets on your hand, then it kind of goes everywhere else. Maybe it's going to grab on your water bottle, then you're going to touch your face, and then you got it on your hand. So I am a clean painter. I'm very cognizant of what I'm doing with my brushes, and you may or may not notice this one on my Even on my palette, I've got a rag over to the right of it, and I put my paintbrushes on the rag so that way they don't roll into my palette, because I can't tell you how many times that's happened, and then I end up with paint on this, and then I pick it up and go, oh man, and then, you know, so little handy tip there. You know, put a towel to the right of your palette or the left, depending if you're lefty or righty, and put your brushes on it so that they don't roll around. Okay, let's keep going. Again, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat. Be glad to answer anything. And if you got any post-production, I guess, go ahead and leave those questions too, and I'll be glad to answer. So you can see that they've already made a pretty big difference since the beginning. If you mess up, the nice thing about this is it is dry layers in between, so you can actually take a little bit of your Gamsol and put it on a nice clean brush and wipe off some areas. So I just kind of put in a little bit of the highlight around one of the sheep's ears, and then I noticed I went a little bit too far, and that makes his ear look out of shape. So then I used some Gamsol to kind of correct that. I feel like I'm doing a play-by-play of like a football game or something. This is weird to do, but all right. Hopefully you guys find this helpful. Okay, just kind of reconstituting the eyes, you know, making them nice and solid in color, the nose. So we know it's not a sheep and not a cow. So these are so similar to like a cow's makeup. One of the things I did there that I like was I was more aware of the planes of the face and neck of the sheep. So I knew, you know, he has a plane on his nose, then it kind of goes out to cheekbone, side of his face, and then because his neck is at an angle, there's like a little bit of an outward angle there, and I purposely made my strokes along with that. I'm really starting to call out the highlights. So with these highlights, I used a lot of titanium white and maybe just a touch of the cobalt blue, so that it just starts showing some highlights. And you'll notice that I kind of go all over the sheep in certain little areas so that it shows that he's nice and fluffy, and that there are parts of him that while it's curved under, some of his hair is sticking out, right? So he's nice and fluffy. So and he's starting to look like a white sheep. Even though he's got a lot of blues and purples and browns and grays and blacks in him, we know that he's a white sheep. So here I'm starting to go back in and add a little bit more darker values. Now, one of the things I am using when I add in this layer is Neomagilp, which is one of the mediums that I recommend, and it's for glazing. So multiple layers of paint with glazing. Old masters called it Magilp, and it referenced as liquid glass. So what it does is it kind of changes the paint to where it's translucent. And so what that does, then all the layers that you added underneath are still kind of shining through with, by adding on this new layer, it's still shining through. And this is how I achieve really nice depth in eyes by using that Neomagilp layer upon layer. And to really get that, you know, it requires patience. So, you know, we're already on week 4 of this painting, and I have been painting it along with you, so I know it's 4 weeks. So and that's what, about 4 times 2, 8 hours at least that I've spent on this. So I've been painting for like 20 years. Back in the day when I first got started, I would spend 40 hours and I still wouldn't be where I am right now. So don't feel like you need to paint at my speed, okay? This is, I'm selling this course on my paintonthepalette.com, and it will be, when you purchase it, it's forever available to you. I am going to be pulling these videos down in a month or so after the videos are professionally edited and become available. So what I'm telling you there is I would go ahead and go, if you really want to paint this and you love it and you're excited about some of the things that I'm teaching and I'm hitting on something with you, go ahead and purchase it, because it's not going to be any cheaper than what it is right now. And because I've got it at an introductory price, and each week I increase the price. So I would recommend you go ahead and get it, because it's not going to be that cheap again. So let's kind of get back to the painting here about the Neo McGilp that I was just talking about. The Neo McGilp, I strongly recommend, but not for the first couple layers. That's something that you want to use after the first couple layers, because you want your previous work to kind of shine through, right? All that other little details that you got there, like all those trees and stuff, that's still going to come shining through, but we're going to add some complexity to that. And the more layers that you get on there, the more complex and the more realistic that it becomes. I love this stuff. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So yeah, I'm adding in my darks here. I am using Neo McGilp, so you can't, it just adds that depth. It's not overwriting what I've already done. Now on this last sheep, that one that's over to the left, I gotta tell you, he's bothered me. I know I told you in the last video that it was like, is it just me, or does his butt look big? And it did look big. So I had to do some kind of figuring out here, because in the reference photo, it did not have the end of his rump in there. So I had to guesstimate, right? Well, I've been working on this thing for a couple weeks, and his rump still bothering me. So you'll see me just make a definitive line on his rump, and I'm cutting it off. And that will become grass. So you'll see that here in a second. All right, so that's where I made the line. And I'm going to come in with some green here in a minute. And I'm going to just kind of wipe that butt out. And then you'll see that created another problem. So what that means then is I want you to constantly evaluate your work. What's working, what's not working, what needs to modify, and where's your eye going to that you don't want it to go to? Because if it's going there and you don't want it to, that means that there's something off. And for me on this one, it was a structural issue, but it could also mean maybe it's a value, too many soft edges, too many hard edges, things like that. Because you need to consider where you want the viewer's eye to go. And if your eye is not going there, your viewer's eye isn't going to go there. And there needs to be a correction. Dancing all over that sheep. Okay, here we go. Now, let's see, I just erased his rump. Now, what that did that I didn't like is I got rid of the extra butt. But then I noticed this hump on top. It's a little bit too big. So then I'm like, okay, well fine, let's just kind of get rid of some of that. And then I'll put in some grass up in there. Yep. So now you can't do that with watercolor. Okay. I love oils. You just get to constantly evolve and move this. One of my students, she decided to make one of the sheep black, and then she changed her mind, made it back to white, and just kind of, and so I mean, that's the beauty of this, is you get to be basically a scientist, and you get to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you have an idea, you have a hypothesis, and then you get to go try it, and if it doesn't work, man, you just fix it. It's all good. This is, I just love oils, guys. It's such a forgiving medium. It's so fun to work with. All right. So I'm gonna blend in that grass in the background just a little bit, but I'm not done with that grass. And now I'm adding in some highlights onto that one, because what had happened is that I saw how dark he was in comparison to everybody else, and so I was like, I wanted to bring him to light too. So I'm gonna start adding some whites and some blues onto his wool. Okay, now what I'm starting to do, adding pops of light. So if you look at the reference photo, it's got pops of light coming around the sheep, around their legs, and really just setting them off. The light's coming from behind them. So I'm just going through, and I am taking, it's actually this paintbrush. This is a Rosemary number 3, long flat, and it's the Badger Hair series. So I'm actually taking the edge of the brush, and I've got it loaded with a little bit of titanium white and Neoma gilt, and I'm just like tapping it. So not all the bristles are hitting. I'm paying more attention to the bristles and where they go onto the canvas than I am actually what I'm doing to the canvas, because I'm looking at those bristles and making sure that I've got a delicate touch to just touch them and add those sparkles of light. Yeah, he looks a lot better. His butt doesn't look weird anymore. Now, this is not going to be the last time I'm going to touch these sheep, because we're going to move into the grass area. And when we get into the grass area, you're going to end up going over some of the sheep's leg, right? So we'll end up kind of reconstituting some of these brights. Again, the more layers, the more complex, the more realistic. See how that just little bits of bright, it's just making them pop forward. All right, so that's all she wrote, folks. That's where we are right now. And so now I'm gonna flip you over to Let's Paint This Live. All right, them up here. Okay, so this is where it is today. And my intention for today is to work on the grass and kind of like the middle and foreground area. And then if time permits and we kind of don't get tired of painting for the day, then I'm going to go into the background too. All right, so let me bring up my reference photo. Okay. All right, so grass colors. When I first started this, I had you mix sap green and yellow ochre, a touch of white, and some cadmium yellow. So if you stuck your paints in the freezer, those paints are still good. So mine are still good, and I did move them over to the side. And somewhere around here is my palette knife. Oh, there it is. Okay. So yeah, like mine are still good. So I can reuse those. But I'll show you again. So like to mix your paint, I'm gonna grab some sap green, some yellow ochre, and a little bit of cadmium yellow. cadmium yellow medium. Okay, so this one's our dark green. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a little bit off to the side, and I'm going to create a variation of that, because I know as the grass recedes into the distance, it's going to become a little bit bluer. And that's just something that you don't necessarily see in the picture, but if you looked outside, you would see that. So I'm going to add just a little touch of the ultramarine blue to this other pile. And I add a touch of white. Okay, let's see how that's going to look. Okay, so that pretty much matches what we had before. Okay. All right. And I am going to be using my medium Neoma gilt. It was stuck. So this is my Neoma gilt right here. Okay. Let me shake that up a little bit. All right. Oh. Okay. All right. Okay, let's do this. So I'm going to put my reference image, I'm going to hopefully put it right here, because I'm going to work from left to right. Generally is how I go. Okay. I might add a little bit more blue. Okay. So as it goes into the distance, it's going to get bluer, right? And it does not look like I'm not making individual grass pieces, right? Because as it goes off in distance, I'm not going to be able to see individual grass pieces. Because the sun is coming from behind, and I know that because there's a sheep, I should have a little bit more dark. And it doesn't show this in the picture, but I'm making this decision to make these things darker around the shadows of the trees. The reason why I'm doing that is it's really going to make those sheep pop. And to me, they should be in dark because of those trees. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of making a brownish green. So like I said before, everything's kind of a little bit of an experiment. So I just kind of want to see what that brownish green did back there, and whether I liked it or not. So I kind of like it, but because of that, I'm gonna have to go into this tree and darken it up a little bit right in here. Okay. I'm gonna reel myself back in and work on the foreground and middle ground. I'm going to start kind of working my way forward a little bit. Grab a little bit in the gilt. So I'm just kind of taking my brush and using the edge of it, so like that, and I'm flicking and just creating the illusion of individual grass pieces. Okay. Go speck of, and to chase a speck of dried paint. I'm gonna just kind of gently kind of blend that in a little bit into the sheet, creating a soft edge. Okay. So what I'm really kind of doing here is I'm just kind of pretty much wetting all of the grass before I add in some details. And I'm going to add just maybe a little bit of variation here. Like maybe there's a ditch or something right here. Yeah, and like another one over in here. Okay. Again, kind of going up into the sheep a little bit with this grain, so it creates a soft edge. And a little bit of color variation in there. Bacon says hi. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my darks. So I'm just using some sap green, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of alizarin crimson. So it's mostly sap green. I'm gonna add a little bit of the gilt to it. I'm flicking my wrist up. I'm creating indication of little blades of grass that are coming up over that sheep. All right. Now, even if I come down a little bit too far in front with some of the darker grass, it's totally fine, because what's going to happen is then I can come over that right up in here with some lighter color and bring that up over the dark. So we're starting from the background, moving forward, so we can build that layer and that visual evidence that it is in front. Ooh, visual evidence. I've never said that in my life. Okay. And I might come back through and add a little bit more dark to that. Right now that's a good value as far as I can see. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit more medium value, because I'm going to bring some light over top of that. So just kind of continuing forward, add a little more green to that. And I'm just kind of hodgepodging it in. Just more green. I'm going to show you a couple approaches that you can take with making grass. So you can take this approach where you're just flicking your wrist. And notice how I'm just kind of pulling it up into that other layer, right? Okay, and then I can bring that even more into focus when I go the opposite. So I'm going to take a couple of these and just add in a little bit of highlights every so often. It's just start with the dark and then add the light. See how now there's little blades of grass kind of all around them? I find that to be the easy way. I know there's another way where what you can do. So I've got a pretty nice light color right here, right? It's all pretty light underneath. So what I could do as another option is I'm going to take my sap green and some of this darker color. I'll do it right here so you can kind of see the difference. And this is something that you experiment with and figure out which way you like better, and you might even like a combination of the two. I don't know. All right. Okay, so I have one of these. It's a little tool right here, and it's like a wipeout tool. They use them in china painting to actually wipe out paint and to get back to the white of the china. So if you really want some nice thin strokes in here, I mean seriously, oh, this is so easy right here. And so like maybe the answer is a combo for you. But when you do this, let me put my reference photo down so I can get a piece of paper towel. So you might want to take a piece of paper towel, and because basically what you're doing is you're wiping off paint. This thing is fabulous for signatures too. Okay, but so in order to do this, you got to have some wet layer of paint down there to move, and I recommend putting the dark down so you can bring it back to that light area. Okay, now I'm going to probably reserve that for a last couple little highlights. So I'm going to go back to the way I was doing things. Okay. I'm putting down a middle tone here, and I'm going to go over that too. And I'm going to move a little bit darker over here. Make these edges. Okay. And I actually, when I'm putting in like the grass effect, I start from the top of where a grass blade will be and move it down to the bottom. That way what it's kind of doing is pushing that paint down to the bottom where it's going to be the darkest. Okay, like so. I'm moving all sorts of directions. So I don't like being able to see a pattern in the grass. It just doesn't really happen, especially in a field. So you can see how easy this is, and I think a lot of times people get caught up in the grass and they're like adding every single little blade. You don't need to do that to begin with. I can go back through the next time and add in some details and maybe just a couple instances of grass, but you really don't need a ton of detail. We know it's grass. Okay, I'm going to pop that area just a little bit more. So I just grabbed a little bit of my cadmium yellow and a little bit of white. And so now I can come in here and really kind of lighten up some spaces. Trying to remember where the shadows are that are cast underneath the sheep. I just want a little bit of different colors back in here. Kind of step back every so often. See how we're doing. So my grass is looking a lot different than what's actually in the picture. So the picture, nuts. There it went. To me, those look like a bunch of kind of vine and weedy looking things, and not necessarily grass. So you could do that if you want to. Okay. And I know one of the questions I get a lot is, how do you make grass? So this is how you make grass. You just gotta, it's a lot of little flicks. That's why it helps if you're back on your paintbrush like this, because then it's just literally a couple little flicks of your fingers. Rather than if you're up here like this, you're like, it's more work actually, I think. Okay. I think what I'm doing here. As it gets closer, everything's going to get bigger. I want some of that color. I like this brightness that's coming through. I want to make sure I capture some of that up front. Getting a little bit too big with my brush strokes right here. Let's see, I'll show you. There you go. I am kind of looking at my reference photo. I do have it down below, so I can see it a little bit better. I know this doesn't show it in the reference picture, but what I'm thinking is, if I'm looking at these sheep, and let's say we've probably got like, I don't know, probably about 100 feet between us, then the grass is going to be coming up a little bit taller the closer they are to me. So I'm making longer blades of grass up around them. Okay. Kind of adding little patches of white. Okay, and I'm going to gently blend some of my grass in. Let's soften that. All right. How are we doing? Good. Okay. Gotta stretch. Okay. Okay. What I'm thinking is I like the sheep, I like the foreground. I'm not digging the background. I want to see some more light. And I want to see a little bit more of the definition of leaves. Okay. And I think there needs to be a little bit, probably better darks. Not necessarily something I see in the picture, but it's something that I want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the light. I'm going to bring in some pops of color of light through the trees. The sun's coming from the other side. We know that because of the sheep, but we're not really seeing that in the reference photo because in the reference photo there's mountains back there. And given the illusion of some mountains over to the left side, but I want some more color. I want some more light. Because what I'm not seeing is that it's evident through the trees that there's light coming from behind the sheep, right? Okay, all right. And where'd my palette knife go again? Is that what fell? That's what fell. Okay. Got it. Okay. Take a little bit of titanium white. I'm going to take some of that cobalt blue. As the sun goes, as we go off into the distance, it's going to get lighter down at the bottom, gets darker at the top. That's another thing that's missing from this. So it should be lighter a little bit down in here in the distance through the trees, and then get bluer as the sky gets closer to you. Okay. I'll mix in a little bit of ultramarine blue kind of over the side, so I've got some different color notes. Okie dokie. grab a different brush. Now this one is it's like a Roseberry number 4 short filbert. I like the filberts a lot. Ah, who am I kidding? I like all the brushes. Okay. Grab a little bit of McGill, because again, I don't want to lose all the work I've already done. I want to kind of be able to see some of the work that's coming from behind. A little bit of sparkles. So what I'm doing is I took a little bit of Gamsol, cleaned my brush, and I'm moving around the edges of some of these sparkles. By adding some Gamsol, it's kind of thinning it down. I'm liking that. I like it a little better. Cool. What I'm trying to do is find that little purple, shade of purple. There it is. I do like that purple that's up over on that side. Background's getting more interesting. That's good. It's getting brighter, less dull. For my taste, anyway. Okay. Okay. So you also notice that I've hardly looked at my reference photo for this. And instead I'm just kind of going with what I want to see happen and what I want the colors to be. And I know that if I mess up, I can wait a little bit, or I can wipe it off, or you know, if I wait till tomorrow, I can just paint over it. If I decide I don't like it like right now, I just wipe it right off. The key is to feel free to experiment. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bits of nice sparkle to the background. So I'm going to take a minute to experiment with some colors to create a bright but cool highlight that could be back down in here, because what I'm thinking is I've got a lot of dark right down in here, right? And the sun's kind of coming through, and it's going to sparkle off some of those. Sun's going to hit through some of this brush. So I want to be able to see some of that brush. So I'm going to experiment with some color. I know I want a cool green with a little bit of blue, just to kind of sparkle through. So let's see if this does the job. It's okay. Let's see. Let's take a little bit of an ultramarine blue, which is a cool blue. A little bit of cad yellow, which is warm. Here we've got a kind of a pretty green. Let's see what happens when we add a little bit of orange to it. And a little bit of white. Well, that's a nice dull green. It's not bad. The key is that it's a different color than the foreground. The foreground, we want that to be brighter, warmer, and so on. Background, cool. Okay? Taking a minute to find the right color. Okay, let's play with that a little bit. I'm already liking that tree a little bit better. It's got more dimension. So by putting in the highlights and then putting in a little bit of the dark, and I am using my Neil McGill. This dark is the sap green, a little touch of ultramarine blue, a little touch of alizarin crimson, and some Neoma gilt. Add some dimension back in here. Definitely better. Yeah, he's coming alive now. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. I may add a little bit of alizarin crimson, some sap green, a little white, I think. Just for a little bit more interesting of a green highlight. Actually pulling in some of that red. It's nice. Sophie says hi. Yeah, I'm digging that. Okay, so that was a little bit of alizarin crimson, some sap green, and some white. And I'm adding a little bit of bits of that into the tree. You just tap it in there. Got a load brush. Grab some sap green. Just tap that in there. Adding some greater dimension to that tree and making some of the leaves come forward. I got a really dark green using a little bit of the black, sap green, and ultramarine blue. That's my Neoma gilt. kind of bringing that down a little bit. There we go. That area over there looks a little bit more defined. What I do see is boom, boom, boom. It's like a staggered little effect I don't like. So I'm going to bring that up into 1 and then bring in some highlights here. Kind of all over, I guess. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, I'm going to continue to work on that tree because I've kind of started it and didn't finish it. I'm going to add in some of the highlights. Bring it forward a little bit. So you use some of your blue from the sky and a little bit of your sap green. Kind of tone it down a little bit. I'm just going to add a touch of the ultramarine blue too. Okay. I don't know if you guys heard all that popping. Okay. Alright, I'm going to start working on this tray now. Okay. Just thinking about where the light's hitting it. Okay, add in a little bit of color variation for the darks. I'm going to take some of the sap green, a little bit of the cad orange. Start working in a little bit of darks right underneath the lights. Alright, what I did that I like is I took a little bit of cadmium white and just kind of add a little bit of sparkle onto these trees, onto the leaves. and kind of made them come forward a little bit more and show the light coming through. Yeah, I like that better. Oops. Okay, I'm gonna go over here and add a little bit more dark. So, I think I'm gonna get some of this sap green, ultramarine blue, and some of the burnt sienna. Grab some of my Neil McGilt so I don't lose some of the other work that I've done. And then come back in here. Just darken this area up in certain spots. Grabbing some alizarin crimson and sap green, some white. Just kind of balancing out what's going on between these two colors. Yeah, it's looking really nice and far in the distance, like that. And I'm just going to soften it. Keep playing with that, and a little bit more white. I'm just lightly touching up here. Really kind of like scrubbing in a dry brush. Okay, trees look like they have a little bit more detail, which is good. I'm more satisfied with the background now, so that's good. Kind of in the reference photo, there is a little house back in here, kind of want to put that in there. Debating. Sure, if I don't like it, I'll take it out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a look first. All right, let's see. So see that little house back there? Little tiny thing. It's kind of neat. So it's like that big, which is the size of this sheep's head, right? So here's his head. It'd probably be right about there. Although, okay, we'll just see what happens. So I'm gonna take a smaller brush, some kelp, and I'm gonna mix some of my black, a little bit of this purple, this purpley color that we used in the sheep. Let's just see what happens here. So he's just like, there's just slightly. He's about the size of the sheep, the whole house, sheep's head. Sheep's head, house, okay. I'm just kind of lightly drawing it in. Okay, so we kind of got it blocked in, which is really blocked in. Okay, now I don't like it, I can always take it out. I can tell you one of the things that's going to end up happening is I'm going to take one of these branches, kind of move it over, subdue it over that. Yep. Okay, it's kind of sticking out a little bit like sore thumb. So set it back just a little bit first. Grab green. Oops. Okay. So he's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. And we don't want that. So I'm going to take some of that purpley color that we made for the sky and kind of got some of that kind of coming up over it. So we're just going to end up setting that back just a little bit. Right now he looks funky. Soften that. I just pretty much took out all the details I just put in there. Now I'm adding in a tree branch that kind of goes over it. Okay, now one of the things that I'm kind of saying around the house kind of sets it back a little bit is some of the fog. And trees, fog in the mountains back in here. I'm going to bring that in there. Cool. Okay. Just a little bit of the Neil McGilpin, a little bit of the green and white. Just kind of bringing that up into this area. Let's see. So you can see why one of these paintings might take a really long time, because, like, you know, you can always kind of add stuff. And whenever you add stuff, you got to balance it out with something else. So. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. I am going to do at least one more round on this, because what I want to see happen is I'm going to add some more detail to my shrimp, not my shrimp, I'm going to add some more detail to my sheep and put the highlights in their eyes, put the final highlights on their wool, so you can actually see some design in their fur, you know, the woolly part of it. And then I'm going to add some kind of like a little wildflower, you know, weed looking things into the foreground here. And then finally, and this has to be dry for me to do this, is I'm going to add a little bit of a fog effect over my mountain area by glazing on some zinc white. So that area is pretty thin over there. Everything else is really starting to thicken up. But yeah, it's coming along. So if you've been painting along with me and you've got painting to share, I'd love to see it. So email it to stephanie@artforpaws.com and I'll be glad to take a look. All right. Until next time, you guys stay safe, happy, and healthy. Bye. I have to come up here. Bye.